Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 96, a special mission that kills two birds with one stone. I'll definitely get this Hogyoku. The huge size and terrifying spiritual pressure showed that this hollow was no ordinary creature. Every time the terrifying hollow took a step, the ground trembled slightly, and huge depressions appeared wherever it passed. Ordinary people had no idea what was happening and could only flee in panic. How is this possible? It's actually a Minos Nand. You know, this is an enemy that only Onmitsukido and captain-level Shinigami can deal with. At this time, Rukia uttered that famous saying. In fact, with the teachings of Uehara Shiroa, her combat effectiveness was no less than that of an ordinary vice-captain. If she hadn't lost her spiritual power, she would have been able to defeat this Minos Grande. It's just that the textbooks of the Mao Spiritual Academy had not been updated in time, so Rukia misjudged the strength of this Minos Grande. Feeling the incomparable oppressive force, Ishida Yuryu was also shocked. Impossible, that bait could never attract an existence of this level. He had felt something was strange a long time ago. This time, the bait attracted too many hollows, and they could not be killed, not at all. This was obviously wrong. Now that such a being had appeared, even if the bait had expired, it was impossible for it to have such a strong medicinal effect. Before, he had boasted that he would kill all the hollows to protect everyone, in order to restore the glory of the Quincy's. Now look, what had he protected? Maybe he was more suitable to be a doctor. Anyway, he was a good tailor, and he should be good at suturing wounds. Kurosaki Ichigo clenched the Zanpakuto in his hand with a solemn expression. He didn't have so many thoughts. No matter how many enemies there were, just chop them and they would be done. In the distance, Inoue Oraheim and Chad were looking at the huge monster in front of them with surprise. Because of the influence of the Hogyoku and the continuous attacks by the hollows, the two had awakened their potential power, that is, the power of the Fullbringer. As a result, they saw a world that ordinary people could not see, saw the monster-like hollows with their own eyes, and discovered the secret of Ichigo Kurosaki. Because they cared about Ichigo very much, they asked the mysterious-looking store manager Urahara, wanting to know the truth of everything. So, Urahara Kisuke brought the two here and let them get the answer themselves. The two looked at the huge and extremely terrifying hollow in front of them with blank faces. Is this still the world they were familiar with? It turns out that Ichigo had been fighting this kind of terrible monster all along. This is the world where your classmate Kurosaki Ichigo lives, Urahara Kisuke pressed down the brim of his hat and said seriously. You need to think carefully about whether or not to get involved. Don't rush to make a decision, because it concerns your fate. At the same time, there was one sentence he didn't say, this also concerns his fate. Urahara Kisuke didn't expect that Kurosaki Ichigo would eventually take this path. Considering the changes that just happened in Naruki City, everything was obvious. It was Aizen who was behind the scenes. The other party had targeted Kurosaki Ichigo and locked the location of the Hogyoku. It seemed that there was no way to avoid it this time. The war was coming, and he couldn't stay out of it, and even innocent people would be implicated. Urahara Kisuke felt very guilty about this, but he couldn't do anything about it. Faced with a strong enemy like Aizen, he could only abandon his extra sympathy. Sacrifice was inevitable. At this time, facing the Minos Grande, Ichigo Kurosaki had already suffered a loss. Just now, he had raised his Zanpakuto and launched a death charge at the Minos Grande. The result could only be said to be commendable. His sword was more than enough to deal with ordinary hollows, but it was not enough to face the Great Hollow. One slash of the sword couldn't even break the opponent's defense. And the Minos Grande kicked at random and kicked Ichigo Kurosaki back. After getting up, he wanted to continue to rush forward with a look of dissatisfaction on his face. Stop it, you can't beat it like this. Seeing that Ichigo Kurosaki was still reckless, Ishida Yurio grabbed his weapon and stopped him. While holding Ichigo Kurosaki's Zanpakuto, Ishida Yurio's body shook, and a large amount of spirit energy poured into his body. He felt unprecedented fullness and strength. This feeling of fullness of power was the first time he had experienced it. Ishida Yurio was confused. His classmates seemed to be more unusual than the hollow in front of him. In the end, with his reminder, the two repelled the attacking hollow. Ichigo Kurosaki was responsible for the burst output, and Ishida Yurio was responsible for using the arrow of light to relieve the fire for Ichigo Kurosaki. After a high-intensity release of the Holy Extinction Arrow, Ishida Yurio's hand was almost crippled, and he couldn't fight with all his strength in a short time. Fortunately, the final result was good. Uehara Shiroa didn't pay attention to all this. He had more important things to do. He could easily control Suifeng when she was awake, not to mention the confused little bee at this moment. By the way, Uehara Shiroa also instructed her. You can't do this at all. You don't have any energy. Didn't you eat? You are one night behind me. You are far behind me. This is not a difficult job for her. This pair of good sisters could be said to have their own characteristics, black and white, ice and fire. One was a passionate kitten, and the other was an iceberg like cold beauty. He. Uehara Shiroa showed a proud villain laugh. At the same time, the system prompted that a new special task had been triggered. Special Mission 15, obtain the complete Hogyoku. The magic weapon has its spirit, and only those with virtue can possess it. Please, host, obtain the complete Hogyoku and restore the glory of the magic weapon. Reward, random ability or item. Uehara Shiroa was delighted when he saw this task. This was a double blessing, killing two birds with one stone. This task came at the perfect time. Originally, he planned to get this complete Hogyoku. Isn't this a coincidence? And the system was right. It would be a waste if this Hogyoku fell into the hands of Urahara Kisuke and Aizen. Urahara Kisuke was determined to maintain the balance and didn't want to sacrifice blood. To put it nicely, he was an asshole, but in fact he was a fence-sitter and a pure idiot. He clearly researched Hogyoku, a treasure that could change the world, but he didn't dare to use it, and only wanted to destroy it. Even Aizen can't make full use of the Hogyoku. The big fluttering moth Aizen was directly beaten to the point of breaking its defense, and actively stopped evolving, turning the Hogyoku in its body into waste. Therefore, even if there was no such task, Uehara Shiroa would get the Hogyoku. If converted into a system reward, it was at least SR. It would be a waste to give such a treasure to Aizen and others. Only people with abundant virtues like him were qualified to own it. As for the difficulty of this task, it was basically not difficult. If it was just when he crossed over, it would be a bit difficult for him to obtain the Hogyoku. Now, as long as he followed the plot, he could easily complete this special task. Urahara Kisuke and Aizen fought countless open and secret battles over the Hogyoku. In the end, Aizen obtained the complete Hogyoku. At the beginning, the complete Hogyoku was in a dormant state, and it took time and resources to fully wake it up. As before, Uehara Shiroa's main goal was to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. He just had to wait for the final harvest. He believed that the other party's expression must be very exciting at that time. Of course, since it was related to special tasks, he also needed to do some preparatory work. However, those trivial tasks would naturally be completed by someone else. This was the benefit of having power. He only needed to enjoy it, and there would be people doing the work for him without him giving any orders. Uehara Shiroa's original intention of establishing the court army was to better enjoy life and complete tasks. Justice, peace, and changing the world had nothing to do with the court army. The only thing that hundreds of people in the court army had to do was to please him and serve him. Mishibane in the base was the one who understood this the most. Just like now, without Uehara Shiroa's orders, Mishibane came in and got busy, dressing, feeding, kneading shoulders and backs. While doing this, she had a smile on her face, and her eyes, like brown gems, were shining with joy. She wore a black silk and white skirt-made outfit that Uehara Shiroa liked very much. Her graceful and plump body perfectly interpreted what is called small branches and great results. Her voluptuous and juicy figure made the maid outfit, which was not very formal to begin with, look even more informal and very tempting. After finishing this serious work, he brought Mishabane, whose face was flushed and red, to the small laboratory in the base. There were very advanced equipment here, which were basically sponsored by Urahara Kisuke. Over the years, Uehara Shiroha had been adhering to the principle of taking advantage of others, and he had almost taken advantage of the poor store manager Bald. At this time, under Mishabane's curious gaze, he was fiddling with the remains of yesterday's mutated white hollow. Uehara Shiroha was still a little interested in this mutated white that imitated the power of Kurosaki Ichigo. Although he didn't know much about these technical equipment, he had the ability to see through everything and predict the future, insight into everything. When the proficiency of observation haki reached the perfect level, the ability of the same level as hearing the sound of all things was awakened. However, Roger's hearing the sound of all things focused on communication and the pursuit of understanding between people. Uehara Shiroha's ability focused on insight. He could see through the future and capture all the weaknesses of the enemy. It was a perfect combat ability. He named it, Insight into Everything. At this time, with the blessing of the perfect level of observation haki, his eyes seemed to have turned into the deep and vast universe. They seemed to contain infinite mysteries and could see through infinite mysteries. Noticing Uehara Shiroha's deep and charming eyes, Mishabane's eyes were full of fascination. In the extraordinary world, power is temperament and charm. Compared with appearance and figure, the attraction brought by this absolute power was more deadly and longer lasting. After a long time, Uehara Shiroha retracted his gaze, shook his head, and looked disappointed. "Sir, why is this hollow so strange?" Mishabane's current strength was not weak. Therefore, she could see that the hollow in front of her was very strange. And ordinary hollows couldn't attract Uehara Shiroha's attention. This is indeed not an ordinary hollow. Uehara Shiroha no longer had any interest in the wreckage. But it's nothing special. It's just a poor imitation and a failure. Even less valuable than I expected. All kinds of power in the world of Bleach were extremely idealistic. A strong power plus a special soul was truly invincible. The same power of the void, the same power of the Shinigami, the same power of the Quincy. Because of the difference in spirit and consciousness, the power was also very different. The reason why Ichigo Kurosaki was so powerful was not just because he had a unique composite bloodline, but because he was Ichigo Kurosaki. For example, the mutant in front of him, even if it copied part of Ichigo Kurosaki's bloodline, was still very weak. In the 1,000-year Blood War, although Yawatch absorbed Ichigo Kurosaki's power, he still couldn't use Getsuga Tensho, which was the most offensive skill in the three realms. Unless they had the Mind Stone and unlimited blade works like Uehara Shiroha. Otherwise, these people would never be able to perfectly copy Ichigo Kurosaki's power. The only one who could do this was him, Uehara Shiroha. Then set a goal first: his omniscience and omnipotence must surpass the Soul King Yawatch, and his attack power must surpass the double-bladed Ichigo Kurosaki. After returning to the Soul Society, Uehara Shiroha received an order from the Central 46th Office. Some say it is a reward. The Captain Commander of the Court Army, Uehara Shiroha, has made great contributions to the Suriitii, has outstanding leadership skills, and the Court Army has strict discipline. From now on, the Court Army will replace the 6th Division and the Onmitsukido to protect the Noble Street. When this order came out, ordinary Shinigami thought it was nothing, but the senior officials were shocked. The captains of the 8th Division, Shunsui Kairaku, and the 6th Division, Byakuya Kochiki, were particularly shocked. At this time, in the captain's office, Shunsui Kairaku muttered to himself with a puzzled look on his face. The Tsuneyashiro family clearly knew that Brother Shiroha and I had the best relationship, so how could they agree to such an order? Even if they agreed, that Tsuneyashiro Tokunada would make trouble. Why would they issue such an outrageous order? Could it be that they wanted to win over Brother Shiroha? Chapter 97, A Gift from Heaven, Aizen's Plan. I think they are truly insane, he muttered to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. Even the old man couldn't defeat Captain Shiroha. What makes them think they stand a chance? These fools are merely seeking their own demise. A smile crept across his face as his mood lightened. He decided he would sneak out to find Uehara Shiroha, share some sake, and celebrate their good fortune. After all, the paperwork piling on his desk could certainly wait another day. Meanwhile, Byakuya Kuchiki wore an expression of unusual complexity as he contemplated the recent decree. As the captain of a noble squad, the 6th Division has always stood as guardian of the noble street, he said softly, his voice betraying the faintest hint of uncertainty. Now the Central 46 has suddenly issued such an order, yet I received no prior notification? A familiar weight of guilt settled in his chest. The Kuchiki family was meant to be the voice of nobility, the steadfast defender of aristocratic traditions. Yet as heir to the Kuchiki legacy, he had broken those sacred rules twice. First by marrying a commoner from Rokangai, and later by adopting Rukia from the same humble origins to fulfill his deceased wife's final wish. The burden of these actions had never left him. He had always felt unworthy of his family name and his position as captain of the 6th Division. This shame had driven Byakuya to make a solemn vow, never again would he break the rules, and no exceptions would be made for anyone. Now that his authority over Noble Street had been stripped away and given to the court army, Byakuya was not angry as one might expect. Instead, he felt only self-reproach and a deepening sense of guilt. When Captain Commander Yamamoto Genryosei Shigekuni heard of the order, he merely snorted with disdain, not even bothering to open his eyes. "It's ridiculous," he said. "The hyena attempts to bribe the dragon." Captain Commander Chojiro Sasakaibe spoke up, confusion evident in his voice. "If you are aware of everything, why allow the other party to grow in power?" In Chojiro's mind, Captain Commander Genryosei had always stood firmly with the nobility. The Gotei 13 had indeed received considerable support from noble families in its early years. The Shihoin and Kuchiki families, 2 of the 5 great noble houses, had even integrated themselves into the Gotei 13 structure. With such deep ties, it seemed inconceivable that the court army would turn against the nobility. But Uehara Shiroha was different. In his eyes, nobles were nothing but trash to be disposed of at will. For the sake of stability, shouldn't such a person be suppressed rather than empowered? Over the years, the Gotei 13 and the nobility had become so deeply intertwined that they could no longer be separated. If this new captain proved too radical, the delicate balance they had worked so hard to achieve might crumble. Yamamoto Genryosei Shigekuni shook his head slowly. "Chojiro, there are some people who cannot be suppressed. Just as you completed your Bankai training in a single month, an impressive feat in itself, Uehara Shiroha's brilliance shines even more brightly than our own. It is my responsibility to eventually entrust the Gotei 13 to someone of such caliber." Balance and order were what he, as the current captain commander, had always prioritized. Whatever came after his time would be for the new leader to consider. Ultimately, strength determined everything. With strength came the ability to maintain balance. Without it, what purpose was there in showing deference to nobility? So his responsibility was clear: select the right successor. And in his mind, no one was more suitable for this position than Uehara Shiroha. If Uehara Shiroha could have heard these thoughts, he would have certainly scoffed, "You've all been thoroughly deceived by that old silver-tongued devil, Aizen." He had to admit that Aizen was truly a master manipulator, skilled at twisting people's perceptions and exploiting their psychology. Aizen's order carried multiple layers of meaning. The first was an apparent show of goodwill, an attempt to appease Shiroha. The second served as both warning and test. After all, Shiroha had previously caused significant trouble on Noble Street using Otsutsuki Naruto's identity. Aizen's decree was essentially saying, "I know what you did," a subtle flex of power. Simultaneously, Aizen sought to determine whether Shiroha had ulterior motives beyond what was already known. The final layer was perhaps the most devious. Shiroha knew that Aizen would soon betray the Gotei 13, leaving chaos in his wake. Anyone associated with Aizen at that critical moment would suffer the consequences. Though the court army appeared to benefit greatly from this new authority, once Aizen's treachery came to light, they would be forced to repay both principal and interest. When that happened, the court army would undoubtedly face retribution from the Tsuneyushiro family, which had already suffered heavy losses.
This old schemer wanted to pit Shiroha against the Tsuneyashiro, a classic case of killing with a borrowed knife.
The privilege being offered was poisoned bait, enticing, but potentially deadly.
Realizing this, Uehara Shiroha inwardly sneered. It's not so easy to outmaneuver me.
I'll take the benefits you offer while leaving the poison for you to swallow. His overwhelming strength and foresight were his greatest advantages. With the numerous rewards provided by the mission system, he had already become virtually invincible. Combined with his knowledge of future events, Uehara Shiroha could easily maximize his gains. No matter how cleverly Aizen and Urahara Kisuke schemed and plotted, in the end, Shiroha would effortlessly claim the greatest prize. To him, these two exceptionally intelligent and shrewd individuals were nothing more than useful tools that would help him complete his latest special mission. From his perspective, the more capable agents he had working unwittingly on his behalf, especially those who didn't demand payment, the better. As for Noble Street, since the nobility would eventually turn against him anyway, he preferred to strike first. Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu might be formidable, but Shiroha's Shunkyo was no less powerful. He was curious to see how the soon-to-be dead would attempt to oppose him. The Tsuneyashiro family might be at the peak of their influence now, wielding tremendous power, but their ascension had come at the cost of countless middle and lower noble houses. If you wish to destroy them, Shiroha thought, you must first drive them to madness. Moreover, Uehara Shiroha held another powerful card up his sleeve. To him, the seemingly mighty Tsuneyashiro family was nothing but a collection of dry bones in an ancient grave, barely worth acknowledging, let alone fearing. In the 5th Division barracks of the Seriidii, Captain Aizen dismissed Vice Captain Hinamori Momo with an uncharacteristically dismissive wave of his hand. The moment she had disappeared from sight, Ikemaro Jin materialized from the shadows. His eyes, narrowed to their customary slits, followed the retreating form of the young vice captain. She truly is a useful chess piece, Jin remarked with a sigh. Lord Aizen, your disguise is more terrifying than Kyoka Suigetsu. In truth, my control over her isn't as absolute as I had hoped, Aizen replied, his voice gentle despite the coldness of his words.
If she had been a blank canvas, I could have painted whatever pattern I desired.
Unfortunately, this particular canvas already bears another's mark. So, I haven't invested excessive time in her development. Jin's face took on a concerned expression.
Is that Uehara Shiroha's doing again? Are you certain he won't interfere with our plans? We're at the most critical juncture now. Jin, there's no need for concern.
I've already sent my gift, Aizen said, his gaze drifting toward Noble Street in the distance, confidence radiating from his serene smile.
Whether now or later, Uehara Shiroha no longer poses a threat to us.
If he wishes to remain in Soul Society, he'll need to tread carefully. Otherwise, those nobles will show him no mercy. Noble Street is not so easily managed.
After all, what was there to fear from a powerful man who had lost his backbone and persistence? My old classmate is not one to compromise, Jin noted with genuine interest. Who do you think will prevail, him or the nobility?
He posed this question strategically, hoping to extract more information, particularly regarding the 5 great noble houses and the Zero Squad. Even as a captain, his knowledge of these matters was severely limited. Only by fully understanding Aizen's plan could he eventually strike with lethal precision. I find myself equally curious about the outcome, Aizen responded, a mysterious smile playing across his lips. I truly hope to witness a magnificent battle. Though the Tsuneyashiro family had grown corrupt over the centuries, they still maintained a formidable foundation. More importantly, they maintained connections with the Zero Squad. While Aizen eagerly anticipated Uehara Shiroha forcing the Zero Squad to reveal some of their hidden powers, he recognized the improbability of such an event. Given the reputation of both the Zero Squad of the Soul King's Palace and the 5 ancient noble houses, Aizen believed Uehara Shiroha would not dare to directly confront the Tsuneyashiro family. Meanwhile, in the flower district of Seriidii, surrounded by enchanting company, Uehara Shiroha clinked glasses with Kayaraku Shunsui amidst the revelry. Although Kayaraku was well known as a generous patron of the flower district, the beautiful attendants invariably gravitated toward Uehara Shiroha. Even setting aside his handsome features and prestigious position, his confident and uninhibited demeanor alone captivated the young beauties who served them. The room glowed with warm light, crystal glasses clinked melodiously, and the atmosphere was one of perfect harmony. Talented men and beautiful women complementing each other like poetry in motion. Observing Uehara Shiroa, who somehow appeared more youthful and handsome with each passing day, Kayaraka Shunsui suddenly felt his age weighing upon him. There truly was no pain like comparison. While Kayarako considered himself reasonably attractive, next to Uehara Shiroa, he felt reduced to a mere supporting character. His companion possessed extraordinary talent, held a prestigious position, and exuded charm and sophistication.
Such good fortune seemed beyond even Kayarako's wildest dreams.
What's more, Uehara Shiroa had earned the reputation summarized in the saying, "The courtesans may change with the seasons, but Shiroa remains eternal."
Reflecting on Uehara Shiroa's legendary stamina, Kayaraka Shunsui could not help but ask with envious curiosity, "Brother Shiroa, you truly are gifted. They say you can entertain 10 companions in a single night. Is there some secret technique I might learn?" Only those who understood the limitations of middle age could appreciate Kayarako's predicament. Moreover, the enchanting attendants of the Flower District possessed skills beyond compare. Even the captain of the 8th Division found himself outmatched. This explained why Kayaraka Shunsui always departed early from their drinking sessions. His capabilities simply had their limits. Yet he too aspired to match Shiroa's legendary prowess. "It's innate talent, I'm afraid, something that cannot be taught," Uehara Shiroa replied dismissively, not even glancing at Kayaraku as he focused on enjoying the attentions of the beauties surrounding him. For a spiritual being of his caliber, a mere fatal wound would hardly be worth mentioning. Entertaining 10 lovely companions seemed trivial by comparison. The beautiful attendants serving Uehara Shiroa giggled at his response, their eyes gleaming with mischief and admiration. The luxurious room, filled with delicate fragrances and warm light, resonated with joyous laughter and happiness. Kayaraka Shunsui weathered face flushed crimson as he took a deep gulp of sake. Happiness belonged to others, sorrow was his alone. He regretted broaching the topic, it had only served to humiliate himself. After enjoying a fine meal and several rounds of drinks, Uehara Shiroa and Kayaraka Shunsui retreated to a more private room where they could speak freely about sensitive matters, particularly the recent developments regarding Noble Street. "So, are you truly confident about taking on Noble Street?"
Kayaraku asked, his expression turning serious as he broached the subject. He understood perfectly what Noble Street represented. It was, without exaggeration, the power center of Seoul society. Those who resided and held influence there enjoyed the highest privileges and support throughout the spiritual realm. For the court army to establish itself there carried enormous significance. Uehara Shiroa's court army now possessed the foundation to grow exponentially in power and influence. Such an immense benefit falling into Shiroa's lap made Kayaraku suspicious of hidden motives. Yet even if conspiracies lurked beneath the surface, the advantages were too substantial to dismiss lightly. Uehara Shiroa maintained his characteristic composure. "What could possibly go wrong? How could I refuse such benefits when they're placed before me?" In recent days, he had orchestrated the court army's takeover of both the defense and daily management of Noble Street. Effectively, half the lives of the nobility now rested in his hands. The benefits had been considerable, almost overwhelming. Fortunately, his ambition matched his appetite, allowing him to swallow all these advantages whole. As for any potential backlash, he didn't perceive it as a genuine threat.
Kayaraka Shunsui still harbored concerns. "Those people may overlook many things, but they cling to power with an iron grip. Are you certain this won't backfire?"
In truth, he was deeply curious. Although most nobles considered themselves too dignified to acknowledge the court army as equals, why had the 4 great noble houses acquiesced to their intrusion into Noble Street?
The court army's presence would inevitably diminish their authority. Could they truly tolerate such encroachment? Everything seemed to be unfolding with suspicious ease, giving Kayaraku an uncanny sense of unreality. Of course they resent it, but what can they do about it? Uehara Shiroa replied, fully aware of the delicate balance at play. The Tsuneyashiro family had been caught off guard by the Central 46 decree and could only adopt a wait-and-see approach while addressing internal matters. Meanwhile, the Kuchiki and Shihoin families had aligned themselves with Shiroa, so their silence was assured. Seeing Uehara Shirowa's unwavering confidence, Kayaraku Shunsui felt his concerns ease. He lifted his sake cup with a renewed smile. If you control both the court army and the Gotei 13, you effectively control all of Seoul society. Even old man Yamamoto has never wielded such comprehensive power. Come, let's drink to a brighter future. Privately, Kayaraku had little love for the nobility yet couldn't bring himself to abandon the Gotei 13, though he had no desire for increased responsibility. The meteoric rise of Uehara Shirowa and his court army represented the ideal outcome from Kayaraku's perspective. You're simply looking to pass the burden, Uehara Shirowa remarked, making it clear he didn't covet the position of captain commander. The various captains of the Gotei 13 were all problem children in their own ways, and managing their personalities alongside administrative duties held little appeal. He had established the court army for greater autonomy and personal benefit. Once the court army completely assumed control over Noble Street, his position as captain commander would carry more prestige than that of the Gotei 13's captain commander. Perhaps, in time, even the captain commander would find themselves taking orders from him. From this perspective, the position of captain commander represented a burden rather than an asset. Uehara Shirowa would be foolish to accept such a role when he could instead be the captain commander who dictated terms to the captain commander. The following evening, Uehara Shirowa returned to the underground base at Sokayaku Hill to meet with Yoruchi Shihoin. On this occasion, the purple-haired, dark-skinned beauty greeted him with unusual enthusiasm. When she looked at Shirowa, her eyes shone with gratitude. Shiroha, thank you for saving Suifeng. Yoruchi had learned of the incident in Naruki City, which she attributed to Aizen's machinations. Had Shiroha not intervened promptly, Suifeng might have suffered severe injury or worse. Yoruchi blamed herself for placing her protégé in danger. That snake Aizen was truly insidious. She has already thanked me properly, Uehara Shiroha thought to himself with secret satisfaction. Though it was his actions that had inadvertently endangered Suifeng in the first place, he had indeed saved her in the end. Therefore, gratitude was still owed to him. And Suifeng had already expressed her appreciation quite thoroughly. Being a man of particular tastes, Uehara Shiroha responded with feigned righteousness, "You're too kind. I merely did what was necessary. However, if you truly wish to show your gratitude, is this sincere enough?" Yoruchi asked, letting down her long hair and beginning to remove her outer garment. Uehara Shiroha regarded her with an intensely serious expression. "Not quite. How about this? That's more appropriate." Ultimately, Yoruchi surrendered herself to the situation with surprising ease. She approached their encounter with greater enthusiasm than during previous meetings. This was partly due to genuine gratitude for Shiroha saving Suifeng, but she also harbored ulterior motives of her own. Hours later, they relaxed in the familiar warmth of the hot spring. Uehara Shiroha dozed contentedly, his expression one of complete satisfaction. Soaking in the therapeutic waters after vigorous exertion truly felt divine. As for the countless complications and hidden dangers of the outside world, the political machinations and veiled threats, they seemed entirely remote from this moment of tranquility. Observing Shiroha's carefree demeanor, Yoruchi felt a pang of envy. Others lived life on their own terms, enjoying fine wine, beautiful company, and freedom from responsibility. How enviable such an existence seemed. As the former captain of the 2nd Division, commander of the Onmatsukido, and head of the Shihoin family, she had never experienced such unfettered pleasure. Now, she couldn't even return to her ancestral home, with worries constantly plaguing her thoughts. Chapter 98, Rukia commits a serious crime, and Ichigo Kurosaki is helpless. They call it living, but it's merely surviving. I truly don't understand what they fight so desperately for, Uehara Shiroha mused lazily, lounging in the hot spring. Just say what you came to say. Taking the opening Shiroha provided, Yoruchi Shihoin got straight to the point. Aizen is about to make his move. What do you intend to do about it? Nothing at all. I'm focusing exclusively on Noble Street for the time being, Uehara Shiroha replied with a faint smile. I don't particularly care about the Central 40 CXS orders, but Aizen's threat is very real. Would you believe that the moment I step away from Noble Street, Aizen will swoop in to cause trouble? You wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to your dear brother, would you? Not long ago, the Central 46 had issued an additional decree. According to this order, because the court army had only recently established itself in Noble Street and was still unfamiliar with the operation of the area's protective barriers, the captain commander of the court army, namely, Uehara Shiroa, was required to remain personally within Noble Street for an extended period and was forbidden from leaving without authorization. It was obvious to Shiroa that Aizen intended to confine him to Noble Street. Yet he wasn't particularly concerned. Though he possessed numerous methods to depart Noble Street discreetly if he wished, he felt no inclination to meddle in affairs that didn't concern him directly. He would only involve himself in schemes that promised tangible benefits. When no such benefits presented themselves, he was content to observe from the sidelines and witness these momentous events unfold. I know you must have some strategy in mind, Yoruchi pressed, but are you truly confident you can handle Aizen once he obtains the Hogyoku? At that point, we won't be facing a mere battle, we'll be facing war. Are you certain no unforeseen variables will disrupt your plans? Yoruchi still believed their safest course of action would be to join forces against Aizen. Wouldn't it be wiser to eliminate the threat before it fully manifested? Uehara Shiroa submerged himself deeper in the warm spring water and replied with casual indifference, "For you, it represents danger. For me, the bigger the storm, the more valuable the fish." Yoruchi raised an eyebrow skeptically. Think carefully about this. Aizen is far more dangerous than you seem to believe. 100 years ago, Aizen had already proven formidable enough to force Yoruchi and her allies into hiding, too afraid to return to Soul Society. Now, Aizen had reached the peak of his power and possessed countless hidden advantages. To be honest, Yoruchi harbored serious doubts about their ability to defeat him. They were only confronting him now because circumstances forced their hand. Feeling Yoruchi's firm hands working the tension from his shoulders, Uehara Shiroa decided to reveal a fragment of his knowledge. Aizen is indeed exceptional, he acknowledged. Your strength only reaches the Millennium Captain level because your inherent talent limits you to that threshold. Similarly, Aizen can only reach the Millennium Captain level because that represents the upper boundary for Shinigami. For me, however, the Millennium Captain level is merely the beginning. You'd better be right about that, Yoruchi replied, not as easily persuaded as Suifeng might have been. Nevertheless, his words sent ripples of consideration through her mind. After their pleasurable interlude concluded, Uehara Shiroa completed his daily, deep relaxation task. The system immediately rewarded him, spiritual pressure +1, Shuanpa +1. Silently, imperceptibly, his power grew stronger. He could feel himself steadily transforming into a transcendent being. While Aizen orchestrated elaborate schemes merely for a chance to become transcendent, the higher realm that the manipulative captain sought so desperately to break through the Shinigami's limitations, for Shiroa, this ascension came naturally. He needed no extraordinary measures, simple daily accumulation would inevitably make him stronger than anyone else. This task system far surpassed both the complete Hogyoku and the Soul King's power combined. Even without special missions, he could become invincible through daily tasks alone. The process might be somewhat slower, but it was considerably safer. He could grow stronger simply by relaxing. This approach seemed vastly preferable to Aizen's desperate struggle for power. While lost in these thoughts, Uehara Shiroa's observation haki detected two familiar figures departing Soul Society. It seems Rukia's situation has been exposed, he thought to himself. My troublesome little apprentice will soon be brought back to Soul Society for execution. And Aizen will find himself trapped in his own web before long. This truly calls for celebration. And what better way to celebrate than by dismantling the Tsunayoshiro family for added amusement? At dusk, on the streets of Karakura town, a brilliant white light heralded the appearance of an ancient portal materializing out of thin air. From this gateway emerged Byakuya Kochiki, captain of the 6th Division, accompanied by his vice-captain, Renji Abarai. The two had journeyed to the human world for a single purpose, to apprehend Rukia Kochiki. Not long ago, Rukia had committed the grievous offense of transferring her Shinigami powers to a human.
The Central 46 had commanded the 13th Division to return her to Seoul Society for interrogation.
During the captain's meeting, Byakuya Kuchiki had personally volunteered for this mission.
His reasoning appeared sound, with Noble Street no longer requiring the 6th Division's protection. His squad had capacity to handle this assignment. His justification was flawless and logical.
Captain Kayaraka Shunsui had been the first to endorse his request. None present were fools, they understood Byakuya Kuchiki's true motivations perfectly. The veteran captains recognized that Byakuya sought to ensure Rukia's safety. If other captains were dispatched, they might show less restraint, potentially resulting in Rukia's injury. Most captains, including the captain commander, willingly allowed Byakuya to retrieve Rukia Kuchiki from the human world with minimal harm. Aizen and his conspirators, for their part, sought to secure the Hogyoku. Should Rukia perish, the Hogyoku concealed within her soul would be lost to them. Meanwhile, Kayaraka Shunsui and several other captains were extending professional courtesy to Uehara Shiroa. After all, Rukia was the student of the court army's commander, and they understood that no harm must befall her. Before long, on a deserted street, Byakuya Kuchiki and Renji Abarai intercepted Rukia Kuchiki. Facing her childhood friend, now practically a stranger, and her elder brother with his perpetually cold demeanor, Rukia felt profound anxiety. She had prepared herself to accept the consequences of her actions. Transferring Shinigami powers to humans constituted a serious transgression, and humans who received such powers were equally condemned under Seoul Society law. To protect that stubborn boy, Rukia had severed all ties with Ichigo Kurosaki. Observing how frail and vulnerable Rukia appeared, Renji Abarai expressed his disappointment. "You're a member of the Kuchiki family now, favored by Commander Uehara himself. How could you fall so far? To have your Shinigami powers stolen by a human, is this how you honor the Kuchiki family's training? Is this how you repay Lord Uehara's guidance?" Though his tone sounded arrogant and he spoke reverently of both the Kuchiki family and Uehara Shiroa, his underlying message sought to help Rukia. If she simply redirected blame toward the human who had received her powers, and with the support of both Commander Uehara and Captain Kuchiki, her punishment might be significantly reduced. From Renji's perspective, Rukia needed only to identify the human who had obtained her Shinigami powers, apologize to Captain Kuchiki, and beg forgiveness. To protect Ichigo Kurosaki, however, Rukia chose uncompromising defiance. "Although I've lost most of my power and remain in this Jigai, that doesn't mean humans stole my powers," she insisted firmly. She refused to sacrifice an innocent life to secure her own survival. No matter what happened, she would not betray Ichigo Kurosaki. "Your life is no longer yours to risk, yet you still protect a mere human? How disappointing!" Renji exclaimed. Deciding that force might compel Rukia toward the right path, he swung his Zanpakuto at her. Despite the dramatic motion, the attack was more theatrical than dangerous, all flash with minimal impact. In essence, he merely sought to frighten Rukia into compliance. Setting aside their friendship, he dared not use excessive force given both Captain Kuchiki and Commander Uehara's interest in her well-being. Throughout this exchange, Byakuya Kuchiki maintained an expressionless countenance, silently observing the interaction between the two. Even when a Quincy arrived to intervene, his demeanor remained unchanged. Witnessing Yuri Ueshida's high-league file technique, Renji Abarai expressed astonishment. "Who are you? A Shinigami protects humans, and now a human defends a Shinigami? Has the world gone mad?" He could only determine that this unexpected arrival wasn't wielding Shinigami powers. Beyond that, Renji's limited experience prevented him from identifying the stranger's true nature. Ishida Yurio's casual retort nearly shattered Renji's composure. Unfortunately for the Quincy, his archery skills couldn't match his sharp tongue. After a brief exchange, Renji knocked him to the ground. In truth, Ishida Yurio possessed considerably more strength than he demonstrated. However, in his effort to relieve pressure for Ichigo Kurosaki, he had overexerted his right arm, sustaining serious injuries from which he had yet to recover. This explained his apparent weakness. Just as Renji was mockingly lecturing the fallen Quincy, a flash of steel and an overwhelming spiritual pressure forced him to retreat.
An orange-haired youth wielding an oversized zanpakuto materialized before him.
Ichigo Kurosaki had arrived. Confronted by this strange Shinigami in traditional garb with an unusually large zanpakuto, Renji demanded, "Which division are you from? State your name. And why is your zanpakuto so abnormally large?"
"I didn't realize it was considered oversized," Ichigo replied, positioning himself protectively in front of Ishida Yuryu.
"What's a division? I don't understand any of that. By the way, my name is Ichigo Kurosaki, the one who's about to defeat you. I hope you're ready to give me some pointers."
Renji's temper flared at these words. First, this stranger had the audacity to challenge him directly.
Second, it was now obvious that this was the human who had acquired Rukia's Shinigami powers. Unforgivable. Renji immediately launched an attack against Ichigo Kurosaki.
He hadn't risen from Rukongai to become vice-captain of the prestigious 6th Division without exceptional combat abilities. However, his strike against Ichigo proved ineffective, and after his boastful declaration, he suffered the indignity of receiving a blow to his chin from his opponent.
Renji's rage intensified. To be injured by a human, a mere pretender to Shinigami powers, was utterly humiliating. At this point, Byakuya Kuchiki finally broke his silence. "Renji Abarai, you're being careless." "Captain," Renji began, somewhat defiant. He believed such an opponent didn't warrant serious consideration.
Byakuya's expression remained impassive as he stated coldly, "A few days ago, the Onmatsukido reported that someone had repelled a hollow incursion in Karakura town. It appears we've found our mysterious defender."
"Captain, I can't believe he defeated a hollow," Renji replied, a calculating gleam in his eyes. "Look at his zanpakuto. Apart from its excessive size, it's entirely unremarkable. A mere showpiece. He's not even at novice level, how could he possibly defeat a hollow?" Turning to Ichigo, he asked smugly, "Boy, you don't even know your zanpakuto's name, do you?" Ichigo responded with genuine confusion, "My zanpakuto has a name? Is that necessary? What does that mean?"
Believing he'd established his superiority, Renji declined to explain further and instead activated his Shirkai, Zabimaru. Powerful spiritual pressure erupted around him, causing the very air to tremble. With his crimson hair, overwhelming spiritual pressure, and imposing presence, he resembled a Super Saiyan as he wielded Zabimaru's segmented blade. Each strike carried deadly intent. Confronted by the transformed Zabimaru with its dramatically increased power, Ichigo retreated step by step until he finally collapsed, injured. The subsequent events unfolded exactly as Uehara Shiroa had anticipated. Just as Renji savored his victory, Ichigo's spiritual pressure suddenly exploded. With newfound strength, he knocked Renji down decisively. Then came the iconic moment when the aloof, expressionless Byakuya Kuchiki demonstrated his overwhelming power, first breaking Ichigo's sword with one hand, then defeating him in seconds using Shuunpa. Ichigo, who had yet to master Flash Step, stood no chance against the advanced technique Senka. In this first encounter, Byakuya Kuchiki definitively established what it meant to be a Shinigami captain. This was perhaps Byakuya's most composed and elegant victory. He had reached his peak at his introduction, only to face subsequent setbacks and defeats, particularly during the 1,000-year Blood War when he nearly faced complete annihilation. Uehara Shiroa silently observed as Byakuya Kuchiki and Renji Abarai departed with Rukia. Meanwhile, Ichigo Kurosaki could only lie motionless on the ground, awaiting death. In this moment, the orange-haired high school student appeared utterly desperate and defiant, yet simultaneously weak, pitiable, and helpless. Strangely, through Uehara Shiroha's perceptive observation, he detected three powerful presences secretly watching the helpless teenager. Clearly, Ichigo Kurosaki would find it difficult to die so easily. When Kasuke Urahara arrived to retrieve the fallen teenager, Uehara Shiroa withdrew his gaze. An extraordinary drama was about to unfold, but the efforts belonged to others while the entertainment and rewards would be his. Let them labor on his behalf for now. Taking advantage of this interlude, he decided to seek some amusement and benefits for himself. With this thought, Uehara Shiroa disregarded subsequent developments. Donning a pair of concealing glasses, he stealthily approached the mansion of Tokunada Tsunoyoshiro. Having served his sentence, Tokunada Tsunoyoshiro had experienced what many called a return of the king, essentially regaining his freedom.
Yet his circumstances remained far from ideal, largely due to that damnable decree.
Originally, the nobles had regarded the emerging court army as little more than a joke. After all, in their eyes, both Rokangai and Hueco were mere wastelands. By extension, the court army that managed such territories hardly merited respect.
Who could have anticipated that this supposedly insignificant force would suddenly assume authority over Noble Street?
To the corrupt nobility, this development seemed nothing short of farcical. With both the Tsunoyoshiro and Kochiki families opposing them, Uehara Shiroha and the court army should never have secured a foothold in Noble Street. Yet surprisingly, the Tsunoyoshiro family had remained passive, allowing the court army to assume responsibility for Noble Street's defense. The nobles had lost significant core interests in the process, leaving them both outraged and bewildered.
Why had the Tsunoyoshiro family, historically lawless and arrogant, suddenly become so timid? And what of Byakuya Kochiki? While others trampled upon his authority, he remained conspicuously silent. In truth, even now the Tsunoyoshiro family remained ignorant as to why their sages and judges had issued such an outrageous decree. Uehara Shiroha had repeatedly rejected their recruitment proposals. Since he refused to serve as their subordinate, they naturally classified him as an enemy. Moreover, his close association with Kayaraku Shunsui, who had caused the Tsunoyoshiro family considerable trouble over the years, marked him as a potential threat.
The Tsunoyoshiro family had been contemplating an opportunity to neutralize him, or at minimum, diminish his rising influence.
Instead, their own sages had effectively invited this wolf into their home. Preposterous. Upon hearing this order, Tokunada Tsunoyoshiro had been utterly dumbfounded. Chapter 99, The Rampant Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada and the Confident Uehara Shiroha. Is this Uehara Shiroha your father? Are you helping them like this, thinking that I, the head of the family, am dead? There must be something fishy going on in this family. Investigate thoroughly. It didn't matter if they investigated.
Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada was surprised to discover that some important resources and funds of their family had already inexplicably fallen into the hands of the court army.
And all the clues pointed to him.
As a result, Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada, who had just been released from prison, almost was sentenced to life imprisonment after serving his sentence. In desperation, he had to maintain his facade and claim that this was his plan all along and everything was under control.
Of course, this couldn't fool the Tsunoyoshiro family elders. Tokunada merely wanted to buy time.
He decided to prepare for a thorough confrontation. Therefore, as soon as he saw the so-called Otsutsuki Naruto approaching, Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada immediately said, "I have done everything you asked me to do.
Isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise?" This conversation had been repeated countless times before.
Each time, the other party had been dismissive.
But this time, Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada was not going to back down. He had much to say.
After working like a slave for so many years, he had to strike back, at least to satisfy his desire to speak his mind. Moreover, he had also guessed the other party's true identity. While Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada was organizing his thoughts and preparing for an explosive confrontation, Uehara Shiroha simply nodded and said, "Okay.
This is the Enreikyoten you want. Take it."
After saying that, he removed the Enreikyoten from his dimensional space and tossed it to Tokunada.
Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada looked dumbfounded. Why didn't this guy follow the expected script again? Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada instinctively caught the weapon.
He instantly felt a sense of blood connection. This was indeed the ancient artifact that had been passed down through generations of the Tsunoyoshiro family.
This was truly the Enreikyoten. Not a fake.
Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada had to suppress all the words in his heart, nearly causing himself internal injury. The artifact he had dreamed about day and night had finally come to him, and he inexplicably felt like crying. He had paid too high a price for this artifact. The journey had been excruciating. Because the surprise came so suddenly, Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada felt momentarily moved.
But he immediately shook his head and thought indignantly, why am I feeling grateful? This guy just returned something that originally belonged to me. This matter is far from over. As if he could perceive Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's thoughts, Uehara Shiroha said patiently, I was merely testing you before. Congratulations, you passed. I will remember your contribution and dedication. Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada, tightly grasping the Enreikyoten, smiled and said, really? Then I am truly honored. In his heart, he was scornful. Are you trying to fool an idiot? Even fools wouldn't fall for such a transparent ploy. If you've ever spoken one truthful word to me, I'll eat the Enreikyoten. Your biggest mistake was handing the Enreikyoten over to me. You'll regret it soon enough. Observing Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's increasingly shallow and disrespectful expressions and actions, Uehara Shiroha guessed what he was thinking. He had long recognized that Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada was an ungrateful person who could never be truly loyal. Although Tokunada had been working diligently for his reward, he had also gained the opportunity to grow and pursue his ambitions. Others would have begged for such an opportunity. Yet this man couldn't even muster basic gratitude. What an impatient creature! If Uehara Shiroha had known Tokunada would be so ungrateful, he would have promised him less, which would have been a better deal. Nevertheless, Uehara Shiroha was a generous master. He magnanimously overlooked the other party's rudeness and simply nodded, now that you have obtained the coveted artifact, that matter can be put on the agenda. He understood Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's plan perfectly. It could only be described as crude and reckless. Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's intellect was truly subpar, comparable to that of Yamamoto. As a villain boss, his IQ fell woefully short of the standard. No wonder Aizen and others looked down on this guy. You don't have to tell me, I would do the same. Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada spoke more confidently with the divine weapon in hand. But internally, he was shocked. This bastard really knows what I'm planning to do. Before this meeting, he had not revealed the details of his plan to anyone, merely making some preliminary preparations. How did this Otsutsuki Naruto know his intentions? Why did this guy seem omniscient? But it didn't matter, his plan was flawless. Once he controlled the Tsunoyoshiro family and negotiated with other ancient noble houses, he could exert pressure on the Zero Squad. By then, anyone who offended him would die. Uehara Shiroha nodded and said, let's not dwell on the past, suffering can be a blessing in disguise. I look forward when you take control of the Tsunoyoshiro family, we will have many opportunities for cooperation. I look forward to it. A cold gleam flashed in Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's eyes. But by then, I may require your assistance. The two agreed on a date for action. When Uehara Shiroha turned and departed, Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada remained alone in the room. He gazed at the Enreikyoten in his hand and displayed a smug smile. His smile gradually transformed into something perverse. I finally have the Enreikyoten. Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada felt that all his previous hardships had been worthwhile. Soon, he would inflict all the pain he had suffered upon that detestable man. His confidence stemmed from the artifact he now possessed. The moment he held the Enreikyoten, he instinctively mastered all its functions and understood the weapon's power. With such a formidable weapon, all his plans could proceed smoothly. Whether it was the Tsunoyoshiro family, Kyoraku Shunsui, or Otsutsuki Naruto, he would spare none. The sinners should be eliminated. This world was guilty. He would destroy all sin. Uehara Shiroha knew all about Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's thoughts and plans. This villain grew arrogant with even the smallest advantage, but his plan was destined to fail. Although he had obtained an extremely powerful artifact, he could destroy nothing except the Tsunoyoshiro family itself. From beginning to end, Tokunada was merely a joke, a clown performing for others' amusement. Without saying a word, Uehara Shiroha had already made precise arrangements for Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada and the Tsunoyoshiro family. A few days later, the Central 46 issued their verdict on Rukia's crime. The criminal Rukia Kuchiki is sentenced to death for committing a first-degree felony. She will be executed by Sokayaku at the Sokayaku Hill execution ground in 25 days. When this pronouncement was released, it caused an uproar throughout Seoul society. Most Shinigami had not expected Rukia's punishment to be so severe.
In their opinion, the Kuchiki family was one of the 4 great noble houses, and Rukia's status was comparable to that of a princess. Moreover, she had not committed an unforgivable crime, but merely transferred her Shinigami powers to a human. For ordinary Shinigami, this was not an offense that mandated execution, especially considering the offender's noble lineage. The captains, vice-captains, and senior officers of the Gotei 13 were deeply confused by Rukia's execution order. The Central 40's reputation had been deteriorating recently because their rulings seemed increasingly arbitrary, no longer favoring the nobility as expected.
Yet since neither Captain Commander Yamamoto nor Byakuya Kuchiki had questioned the decision, others felt they couldn't voice their concerns either. However, all high-ranking Shinigami knew that the captain commander of the court army, Uehara Shiroa, was particularly fond of Rukia. With his lawless and unscrupulous temperament, surely he wouldn't remain silent and inactive, right? But Uehara Shiroa maintained complete silence.
These days, he had been diligently guarding Noble Street, dedicated to his work like a great loyal minister. Several captains even speculated that perhaps the strongest genius had been tamed by the nobility. They felt profound disappointment at this thought. However, Kayaraka Shunsui didn't believe that Uehara Shiroa would fear those nobles or be corrupted by such despicable individuals. He approached Uehara Shiroa directly and asked bluntly, "What do you think of this verdict? You don't really agree with this absurd order, do you? This must be Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's conspiracy." He keenly sensed that something was amiss. The seemingly peaceful Seoul society was actually churning with undercurrents, filled with the atmosphere of an approaching storm. The Central 40's determination to execute Rukia seemed oddly excessive. Therefore, they must have ulterior motives. Kayaraka Shunsui knew that Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada had been freed, and that Tsunoyoshiro family held influence over the Central 46. It seemed highly probable that Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada was the architect behind these events, driven by some hidden agenda. "I want to help, but I can't leave now," Uehara Shiroa said in the luxurious Noble Street mansion, spreading his hands in feigned helplessness. "The Central 46 has explicitly ordered that I not leave Noble Street. I can't simply defy them, can I?" It wasn't impossible, but it would be troublesome and wouldn't maximize his benefits. Could it be that the previous series of orders were designed specifically to confine Brother Shiroha to Noble Street? That seems excessive, doesn't it? Has the Central 46 lost their minds? At this moment, Kayaraka Shunsui belatedly realized the gravity of the situation. Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada's scheme was more terrifying and unhinged than he had imagined. This man was far more dangerous than before. It seemed that Tokunada's imprisonment had not been fruitless. During the past 100 years, he had likely spent every waking moment devising these malevolent plans. This was bad. Both brothers Shiroha and Rukia were in peril. With these thoughts racing through his mind, Kayaraka Shunsui looked at Uehara Shiroha with a serious expression, intending to continue persuading him. However, at that moment, Uehara Shiroa was leisurely enjoying fine food and wine while being attended to by beautiful servants. Judging by his demeanor, he clearly didn't take the Central 40's decree seriously at all. Kayaraka Shunsui suddenly smiled and said, "I was overthinking it. It seems that Brother Shiroa has already made up his mind. The reason you haven't taken action is because there's no need to." "No one can execute my disciple," Uehara Shiroa replied lazily. "But there's no need to rush. Rukia is still too naive. This is an excellent opportunity for her to grow and gain experience. Perhaps she will achieve enlightenment in prison." In his estimation, among his 3 young protégés, Nanao Ise was the most capable and obedient. Momo Hinamori and Rukia possessed energy and youthful vigor, but because of this, they often followed their own inclinations. This was a perfect opportunity to teach them about society's dangers. For his students' growth, he, as their teacher, had only their best interests at heart. Kayaraka Shunsui relaxed his expression, picked up his wine glass, and took a drink. His tone reverted to its typically casual and unfocused quality. "It's good that you have a plan. Don't worry, you won't stand alone.
My old friend will certainly help, since Rukia is also his subordinate. And of course, I'll assist as well. Regardless of the circumstances, he would do everything in his power. This would also reduce the burden on Uehara Shiroha and Captain Yukitake. Lord Aizen, everything is proceeding exactly as you predicted. Uehara Shiroha has indeed remained within Noble Street. At that moment, Tozen left the underground council hall and arrived at the 5th Division barracks. Ikemaro Jin had taken over the work of maintaining their facade there. Tozen had always been extremely wary of Uehara Shiroha. In his assessment, this man was even more terrifying than the most powerful Shinigami, Yamamoto Genryusei Shigakuni. After all, the captain commander was elderly and no longer possessed the ambition of his youth. Uehara Shiroha, conversely, brimmed with vigor and mystery. He seemed to know almost everything and wielded tremendous power. Such a monster posed a severe threat to their plans. Therefore, Tozen had been gathering intelligence about him through secret operatives. According to reports, Uehara Shiroha had spent recent days eating, drinking, and enjoying himself in his Noble Street mansion. Even when the Central 46 issued the order to execute Rukia, he showed no reaction whatsoever. Tozen attributed this outcome to Aizen's strategic planning. Interesting. Aizen's lips curved into a slight smile. Yes, but don't you think this is progressing too easily? It appeared that everything was proceeding according to plan. But in truth, this development contradicted his expectations. In Aizen's prediction, Uehara Shiroha would never comply with orders so obediently. He had anticipated that once Rukia brought the Hogyoku back to Soul Society, Shiroha would definitely take action. Surely the man couldn't be truly indifferent to the Hogyoku? Aizen had meticulously crafted a series of plans to counter Uehara Shiroha. Instead, he found himself strategizing against a phantom while his opponent simply remained indoors. Strangely, this unexpected development pleased Aizen even more. Tozen was momentarily stunned before regaining his composure and lowering his head. Yes, Captain Aizen, I was careless. Could it be that Uehara Shiroha is planning something and has chosen to lie low? He acknowledged his short-sightedness. How could someone like Uehara Shiroha be so easily managed? The man's compliant behavior must be a facade, concealing some sinister scheme. Rather than saying he's keeping his plans hidden, it's more accurate to say he's so confident of victory that he sees no need to act, Aizen replied. Aizen was intensely curious about the source of Uehara Shiroha's confidence. Fortunately, he had prepared several contingency plans and maintained absolute faith in the Hogyoku. As long as he secured the intact Hogyoku, it mattered little where the other party's confidence originated. What exactly is Tsuneyoshiro Tokunada planning? After hesitating for some time, Tozen finally uttered the name. Hearing this, Aizen's eyes remained calm as he responded firmly, "Yes, I understand you don't want vengeance to blind your sense of justice, so you've foregone revenge. But you needn't exercise such restraint. Since Uehara Shiroha has established himself in Noble Street, Tsuneyoshiro Tokunada will only bring about his own destruction. As the saying goes, a dragon does not cohabitate with a snake." With his status as one of the 4 great noble houses and that meager intelligence, Tsuneyoshiro Tokunada might outmaneuver ordinary individuals, but confronting Uehara Shiroha would guarantee his demise, even with the Tsuneyoshiro family's backing. Aizen had arranged for Uehara Shiroha's placement on Noble Street with the intention of using one adversary to eliminate another. In his assessment, Tsuneyoshiro Tokunada and the Tsuneyoshiro family were finished. Now, he awaited the surprises that Kasuke Urahara, Ichigo Kurosaki, and Uehara Shiroha would bring him. This world had been too boring for far too long. Chapter 100, The Disaster Strikes, Aizen Stirs Up Trouble. After Kayaraka Shunsui left, Uehara Shiroha kicked back and started watching the show unfold. He unleashed his perfect level of observation haki, blanketing Urahara Kasuke's secret base in the human world. The spiritual barriers there were pretty intense, with Sekiseki Stone providing cover. Even Aizen couldn't directly sense what was happening inside, he'd have to slowly narrow down the area to pinpoint it. But for Uehara Shiroha? Not even a challenge. He easily pierced through several layers of barriers and observed the situation inside.
At this point, after surviving the Hollow Crisis, Ichigo Kurosaki had just clawed his way out of despair and reclaimed his Shinigami powers. He was stronger than before, but nowhere near strong enough for what lay ahead, breaking into Soul Society to rescue Rukia. When Hollows had attacked his family, Rukia violated Soul Society's laws to make him a Shinigami so he could save his sister. His family was his greatest weakness, and Ichigo was determined to repay this debt.
To prepare him, Urahara Kisuke had developed 3 treatments. The first step was dodging Yururu's superpowered punches to regain spiritual power.
The second step involved cutting his chain of fate and becoming a Shinigami again before his soul completely hollowified. Just when hollowification was about to consume him entirely, Ichigo found himself in his inner world, facing a strange guy in a black coat. Though the man kept talking, Ichigo's ability D kicked in, selective deafness at its finest, and he couldn't hear a word. Somehow, he still managed to reclaim his Shinigami powers. His spiritual pressure erupted with such force that it shattered Tessai's 99th level binding Kido. Afterward, Ichigo smashed the hollow mask forming on his face and became a Shinigami once more. With the first 2 steps complete, only the third remained, cutting off Urahara's hat, with no time limit. Ichigo figured it would be easy, he wasn't the same weakling as before. "I only need 5 minutes to finish this last challenge," he boasted. Reality proved a lot harsher. Facing Urahara with his released Zanpakuto, Ichigo got his ass handed to him and even felt his life threatened. In that critical moment, he returned to his inner world and saw the strange man again. "My name is..." the man said, but even though Ichigo strained to listen, he still couldn't hear a damn thing. Meanwhile, in his mansion on Noble Street in Siriitii, Uehara Shiroha sipped wine and enjoyed grapes peeled by his maid. While living his best life, he activated his observation haki to see through everything, instantly perceiving what was happening in Ichigo's inner world. Seeing Ichigo still shouting, "What did you say?" "I can't hear you," he nodded to himself. The letter of D really lives up to its reputation. He observed all the interactions between Ichigo and Zangetsu, recognizing that what seemed like a 2-person game actually had 2 more observers, a peeper and Hollow White. Hayasuba had just intervened, painting Zangetsu's real name black, making it impossible for him to say the name Yawatch. Without a name, there's no power. Zangetsu, stripped of his name, couldn't guide Ichigo down the Quincy path. This was how the monks secretly controlled everything, determined to maintain the balance of the 3 realms at any cost. As for Hollow White, he'd put himself in a box and presented himself to Ichigo as a gift. As Ichigo's true Zanpakuto, White worked his ass off only to be completely unappreciated. Every time he revealed his identity, Ichigo would just go, "I don't want to hear it. You lied to me." The whole thing was like some cheesy third-rate romance drama. After achieving Shirkai, Ichigo was feeling pretty cocky. He sliced through Urahara's body with 1 strike, completing the final test. Urahara stared at him and thought with relief, "If Benihime hadn't defended me at the last second, I would have lost an arm." What incredible growth! He picked up his sliced hat and complained, "I'm glad you passed the final test, but did you really have to destroy my hat like this?" "Ha!" Ichigo replied with a blank expression, Zangetsu resting on his shoulder. "I just achieved Shirkai and can't control it perfectly yet. You can't blame me for that." Zangetsu's Shirkai form lacked a conventional guard or handle, looking strange and wild. The spiritual pressure concentrated on its edge and the devastating slash it had produced left the 2 kids watching from the sidelines completely shocked. "Mr. Kurosaki, this just won't do," Urahara declared, adjusting his hat. "You made 1 powerful strike, but you need to make that your standard attack. Otherwise, you'll never handle the Shinigami of Siriitii, you might not even survive. The opponents you'll face are much stronger than me." Hearing Urahara's warning, Ichigo's expression turned serious, but there was no backing down in his eyes. Meanwhile, Uehara Shiroha noticed that Orihime, Chad, and Yuria had also completed their respective training. Soon the disaster quartet would be ready to go. They entered Siriitii through Urahara's special gate, and just like in the original timeline, encountered Kotatsu, the Dawn Ice Cleaner. This thing operated on pure rules, conventional power couldn't touch it. The 4 travelers plus 1 cat fled and eventually crash-landed near the Western Rukon district's White Road Gate. Ichigo, with his greatly increased strength, defeated the gatekeeper Jidanboe Kanzaka, and with his help, successfully broke into Soul Society.
Then he accidentally ran into that fox-faced Jin Ikamaru, who sent him flying back with his extending Zanpakuto.
Of course, Jin's appearance wasn't coincidence but careful preparation. Aizen had predicted Ichigo would show up at the Western Gate since Urahara's sphere of influence was primarily in West Rukon.
Jin deliberately held back, essentially just saying hello.
This introduction served to familiarize Ichigo with captain-level strength while giving him time to cause more commotion later.
The more chaos, the better for Aizen's plan.
Besides Aizen, Uehara Shiroa was also keeping tabs on Ichigo and his friends. For him, this was just like watching a drama series, pretty entertaining stuff. The next day, following Central 40's XS orders, Renji Abarai and the Onmitsukido escorted Rukia to the Shrine of Penitence. This tower was constructed entirely of Sekiseki stone. Once locked inside, ordinary Shinigami had zero chance of escape. The tower featured a small window perfectly positioned to view the Sokayaku execution site. As the execution date approached, staring at that terrible instrument of death would psychologically break prisoners, making them eager to confess their crimes, hence the shrine's name. However, Rukia remained completely composed throughout. After leaving the shrine with mixed feelings, Renji encountered Aizen, who had his own agenda. After exchanging pleasantries, Aizen invited Renji for a private conversation. In his office, Aizen casually organized some documents while putting on a wistful act. "It's been so long since you transferred from the 5th Division to join Captain Zaraki.
How long has it been since we had a chat like this? How are things going for you?" "Captain Aizen, what's this about?" Renji, never one for small talk, cut straight through Aizen's nostalgia trip. Seeing his bluntness, Aizen got right to the point. "Do you truly believe Rukia deserves death?" "Yes, she overstayed in the human world and lent her Shinigami powers without authorization. These are serious offenses. But why was her original 35-day sentence shortened to 25 days? And why use the Sokayaku normally reserved for captain-level criminals on her? Does that seem reasonable to you?" "Well..."
Renji stood stunned, his mind struggling to process this.
Aizen had a point though. Setting aside Rukia's noble status, how could a low-ranking officer like her merit execution by Sokayaku? The perfect Sokayaku could instantly vaporize a Shinigami's soul. Using such a weapon against Rukia was like swatting a fly with a cannon, complete overkill. All she did was pass Shinigami powers to a human. You'd think she desecrated the Central 40's XS graves or something. Seeing Renji wavering, Aizen pressed harder. "Something feels wrong about this whole situation. It's as if some unseen force is manipulating everything from the shadows. I have a hunch." Watching Aizen play Renji like a fiddle with just a few words, Uehara Shiroa shook his head. "There must be someone behind this? Isn't that person you, Aizen? You've got some weird hobbies, man." Aizen chose Renji for his manipulation because the redhead was impulsive and easy to deceive. Plus, it helped muddy the waters. Ultimately, it was just to satisfy Aizen's twisted pleasure in breaking people's mental defenses and pulling their strings. However, with Uehara Shiroha around, Aizen would definitely experience more setbacks than in the original timeline. Ignoring Aizen's mind games, Uehara Shiroha focused on Ichigo instead. What happened next followed the original plot pretty closely. With Kokako Shiba's help, Ichigo's group entered Soul Society in ridiculously over-the-top fashion. The Shiba family possessed technology capable of accessing the Soul King Palace, and since the defense systems of Soul Society and the palace were integrated, Kokaku's cannon could punch right through Soul Society's barriers. The 4 humans, plus Yoruchi in cat form and Ganju Shiba who joined midway, were all transformed into human cannonballs. These projectiles burst through Soul Society's defenses, scattering as they landed. The entire Soul Society went nuts at the sight of these Ryoka falling from the sky. Thanks to Jin's earlier welcome, the Gotei 13 took this invasion seriously. Elite soldiers patrolled everywhere throughout Siriiti. Ryoka referred to spirits invading Soul Society through unauthorized means. Similar incidents had happened before, but generally,
the intruders weren't especially powerful. So even though this invasion caused quite a commotion, the captains weren't particularly worried.
Based on their spiritual pressure readings, these Ryoka weren't serious threats. Even vice-captain level Shinigami could handle them. The massive troop deployment was purely for the nobles' protection.
Thus, except for the two wildcards, Mayuri Kuratsuchi and Kenpachi Zaraki, the other captains didn't actively engage but chose to observe.
After landing, these skilled Ryoka raised hell throughout Siriitii.
Uehara Shiroha knew that with Aizen's cover and arrangements, Ichigo would cause more and more chaos, eventually forcing even old man Yamamoto to release Ryujin Jaka. Seeing the time was right, he stood up, ready to clean house. In Soul Society, the Ryoka's commotion grew louder and the situation more serious by the minute. Chad bulldozed through Siriitii, knocking patrolling Shinigami left and right. Meanwhile, Yurio easily defeated Jirobo Ikanzaka, 7th Division's 4th seat. This guy was Jidanbo's younger brother, but unlike his heroic sibling, he was a complete scumbag. Jirobo, self-proclaimed master of projectile weapons, used ranged attacks like Yuryu. However, his strength didn't even come close to the Quincy's. Despite all his dirty tricks, he ended up seriously injured and defeated. Even if he recovered, his days as a Shinigami were probably over. Yet this fool had the nerve to claim he wielded the strongest projectile weapon. Uehara Shiroha snorted at this. If this guy's Zanpakuto was half as impressive as his mouth, he wouldn't have lost so pathetically. Compared to Yuryu and Chad, Ichigo's exploits were even more impressive. He defeated Ikaku Madarame, 11th Division's 3rd seat, and then Rinji Abarai, 6th Division's vice-captain, back-to-back. This wasn't the restrained Rinji from the human world but Rinji at full power fighting on home turf. And while Ikaku's Shurkai had some tricky moves, his combat ability was solidly vice-captain level. The death-defying Ichigo had quickly reached vice-captain level fighting capability. In an incredibly short time, his strength had skyrocketed, making him an even greater threat to Soul Society. The Department of Research and Development had already raised the threat level of this Ryoka invasion. But for the nobles on Noble Street? This invasion was just a minor annoyance. They continued their drunken revelry, with music and dancing, not taking these travelers seriously at all. Their long period of peace and privilege had made them completely complacent. To Uehara Shiroha, they were just pigs fattened by luxury, ripe for slaughter. At that moment, the Tsuneyushiro family was holding their regular meeting. Those present were the real power players of the family and potential heirs to the family leadership. Seeing these Soul Society bigwigs obediently following his orders, clan leader of the Tsuneyushiro felt immensely proud. He relished this feeling of wielding power. In his mind, authority was the only true power. Even mighty Shinigami captains had to bow before the Tsuneyushiro family's influence. Then, remembering the main purpose of this family gathering, he asked, "Any news about the court army's orders? Why would Central 46 issue such a decree?" That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.